Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Compliance Clips with your co-hosts, Rick Morgan and John Farquhar. Today, we've got a special guest, Doug Marcello, who's some big legal guy down in the U.S., and I know you guys have heard about him. So let's get to know a little bit about him, and let's have a conversation with Doug and see what he's got to say for us. So, Doug, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Doing great, John. Honor to be here. Yeah, I'm an attorney, trucking defense attorney down in the U.S. I'm based in central Pennsylvania, right down 81, but I've had cases in 38 states across the country, and I had one case in Ontario, up in Kingston one time. I have my CDL. I'm involved with a lot of trucking organizations, do a newsletter, podcast, YouTube, all kind of things, basically to help the industry that's been so good to me.
Wow, awesome. So you've gotten around for a bit then.
A little bit. That's right.
Yes. Well, there you go. So, well, we're going to have a little fun today chit-chatting. So I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, Rick, because Rick's got the topics in his head of what he wants to focus on. And I think we got some fun stuff here.
Excellent.
Well, we better get them out through my mouth before they leave my head altogether. But thanks for joining us, Doug. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
John and I are followers of many of your information sessions, and it's been great to be able to connect with someone with your level of exposure and experience in the industry. So we are currently running a little series on telematics and how this particular scientific development is affecting the transportation industry across a wide range of areas. And one of the things that's come to light and we're considering is telematics in the courtroom, and who would be better qualified to speak to that than a lawyer who specializes in transportation law and has a CDL. So, John, why don't you start the ball rolling with your usual low-level questions?
Well, you know what? I was going to say, let's start with the simplistic aspect. You know, we've now got every driver in North America using an electronic logging device, an ELD, to track their hours of service. I know a lot of drivers are thinking the same thing. It's like, nah, you can't have that. You can't have that. That's private, you know, or hey, in 6 months' time, it just deletes, it's gone. Yeah. Well, we know that in the event of something catastrophic, we're telling our folks, archive that, gather that information, preserve that data, because it's going to come into handy. So, but with what you're seeing in the industry right now, just from kind of that low level approach with the simplicity of ELDs, what effect is that having currently in different cases?
Yeah, and that's exactly right, John. You know, what we have is we've become an ELD world now with this, unless of course you're running a pre-2000 truck with which the value of which went up immeasurably after the ELD reg came out of here. But you're exactly right. You know, the notion of, gee, the accident happened 6 months ago, so I don't have to have them at all, doesn't fly. The attorneys who sue out there, the billboard attorneys, they have gotten this internet, exchange of information where I'll see where they demand virtually the same information in every case. Among that is 6 months of logs. Now, we don't necessarily have to give them 6 months of logs, and we'll push back. I had a case in North Carolina where a federal judge down there took the time to really consider the federal regulations and said, hey, look, anything beyond the date of the accident and 7 prior days, unless there's something in there that shows a violation of the hours of service, what does it matter what the prior 22 days of the month have to do? Mm-hmm. But you don't always get folks who give it that much consideration. And many times it's just a matter of the judge will think, well, let me pick a number here, be it 6 months or 30 days. 30 days seems to be about what it is. Mm-hmm. But the key thing is you got to have it. There was a case not too long, or a number of years ago, in my area, I think it was before ELDs, major trucking company, fatality. They come in and they go, we don't have the logs. We destroy them after 6 months. And the judge said, well, let me ask you this. You're a big trucking company, and this is a rather conservative judge. I know the fellow. You unfortunately encounter fatal accidents during the course. Yeah, unfortunately, we probably have that several. And when you do that, there's always a lawsuit that follows. Yeah, there's always a lawsuit. And when there's a lawsuit, did they ask for the logs? Well, generally, yeah. So when this fatal accident happened, you knew somebody was going to ask you for the logs. That's kind of the way it goes on that. So yeah, otherwise you raise in what we call in the United States an issue of spoliation. Now, many people mispronounce it as spoliation. That's fine because it helps folks to remember it. Spoliation means if there's evidence there that you knew or should have known is going to be important, then what you should have done is preserved it. And the court can do anything from find, you being, automatically liable for the case. That's very rare. But usually what they'll do, they'll say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the trucking company had information, let's say logs, that they knew could be a vital role in this case and didn't keep them. You can presume that there is bad evidence in there that is against them. Otherwise, they would have kept it.
Right.
We want to avoid that.
Right.
Again, so, what we want to do is post-accident, lock it down, lock down the telematics, lock down the other material on that. So you're exactly right, John. It's a key thing that we got to do. And you can't just go on the FMCSA 6-month document retention. You got to think long-term on that.
Right, right. One of the things that we've noticed that you're very big on, and you do a lot of sharing of information, is with your policy and procedures manuals, right? And making sure that you have the right language in there that says what you're going to do. Practice what you preach. Don't just slap something up and say something. In this situation, is this a good area to create a policy around not only the spoliation factor, but also the retention of particular documents as far as gathering those documents in the event of a future court case?
Yeah, John, what I have, and when I go around and speak, I tell folks, look, as a service, we've got a number of documents we prepared for trucking companies that we're glad to share with them, and for free. Now, when have you ever heard that, guys, from an American attorney?
Really?
Yeah. From a lawyer, no less.
So one of those documents is your document retention. And, I think with regard to policies, less is more, because the more policies you have, the more that you can potentially get yourself in trouble with. But I would keep it minimalist, but I would have a checklist on that. What documents to keep afterwards, starting with the logs, going to the DVIRs, going down through that, to have in the event that an accident happens. And it used to be, I would say, well, you want to do this or think in terms of this on a DOT recordable accident, towed from the scene or treated from the scene. In today's world, I'm not saying you have to do it for everyone, but you got to think in those terms anymore. That's how much it's become in the States in terms of any accident can give rise to some type of lawsuit, and we see it down here one billboard at a time.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, up here in Canada, our rules, laws, and whatnot are slightly different. We have some different things, but we also notice they're a little more relaxed in comparison to what we have in the U.S. And Rick and I are big advocates of stating, you know what? Use the region that you're traveling in that has the strength of the highest power, I guess you could say. The better the rule, that's what you want to implement as a best practice. Just because Canada says, oh, we don't worry about this over here, but the U.S. is going, holy crap, you're going to do this. Well, then follow what that is. A lot of times the regulations from the U.S. and Canada are quite different. We tell people, you know what, if you're going to the U.S., put everything as a U.S. regulatory against your Canadian practices. Therefore, you'll now have best practices in Canada.
Yeah, great advice, John. And it's got to be for the preparing for the maximum exposure on that.
Yeah,
and I think exactly what you need to do on it.
Right. So if I can just ask a question,
Please.
I don't want to get too far off of this, but one of the things that we're starting to see, Doug, both from the U.S. and in Canada, is the default statement of claim of distracted driving and that the driver was on the cell phone. Can you tell us what you're seeing from your side about the whole issue of cell phone forensics, maintaining the cell phone integrity, and not exposing oneself to spoliation because we didn't preserve that?
Yeah, I think the primary thing is I think you don't have to do it in every accident. You have to look in terms of the ones. The most severe accidents, I think it's a consideration on that. And I'm dealing with something like that now. And the key thing, the options range from swapping out the driver's cell phone. I've done that before. Hey, we'll buy you a like model of it. Let us have yours and we'll keep it. Although I've come to find through education by experts on this that it's probably better to have a forensic download of it in a bad situation, because the information on the preserved cell phone, as good as your intention is, can degrade over time, can be eliminated or such. So I'm in the process now of setting up a download for a cell phone for that very reason, Rick.
Cool. Worth the investment in that case. Yeah.
And so then that leads us into things like dash cams
Mhm.
and the telematics from the engines. You know, we in the industry have always struggled with what do we do when we've had a serious crash and we want to download the black box, but they start the truck up and then to move it and they wipe it out. And now
Yes.
on top of that, we have the dash cams, and where we've got dash cams data going to the cloud, much like the ELDs. What kind of steps are you recommending that we're protecting the dash cam information for the required period of time?
Key thing, let's start with the let's start with the ECMs, electronic control modules, the black boxes. The key thing for companies is know what type of units you have. You got a Detroit engine, you're exactly right, Rick. You start it up and move that, you're going to overwrite the last stop. You'll still have the hard brakes in there, as I understand. And again, I'm not an engineer and I don't play one on television, but I listened to enough of them to try to get the guidance and say, look, you know, it's why I recommend really you should get an accident reconstructionist ahead of time, you know, because those folks can then tell you what you need to do when the accident happens. And so that you can then come out and start to do that procedure and do it well so you don't lose the information. If you're running a Mac or a Volvo, there are only 3 people in North America, 4 at the most, that can download that data. That's all that Volvo Mac given the software and the rights to. And for the privilege of doing that, they have to charge you $2,500, and that's set by Volvo. So know what you're doing, know what you're involved with on that, and how to preserve that data. The Detroit, my understanding is generally don't start the engine, maybe disconnect the axle. But again, you should talk to people who really know what they're talking about on that. I just can tell you, be warned. On the dash cam, one of the things on that is to make sure that we do the download right away. If there is a memory chip or a SIM card in there, make sure we preserve that. Make sure, you know, I'm all for making a duplicate of that video right away, because, you know, electronics, and particularly something's involved in an accident, stuff happens, as we would say. The other thing on that is with regard to your dash cams, you know, if it is an impact or it isn't going to generate preservation of that particular, you know, many times it's a G-force that has to be felt in order to lock in that. Make sure your drivers know that, you know, for most of them, there's a button there to hit so that they can hit it and lock that in. Another thing is, you know, sometimes we have different lengths and different versions of the video that comes out. And I say different versions, it's the same visual, but some of them will have speed and other data on with the visual as opposed to just the visual. So I'll say to the folks, you know, hey, talk to your folks in the back office. Let's make sure we have a copy of that one. And then one of the other things is for your video cameras, make sure you know when the upload is going to occur. You know, and again, I'm not that smart to think of these things. They're all from experience, guys. You know, company that I had an accident out in the middle of nowhere in the West. Car comes over, crosses the center line, hits it. The truck rolls over, bursts into flames. Their video unit was sending it up to the cloud almost instantaneous. And by virtue of that, we have the whole thing on video. Now, the alternative is the middle of nowhere, you know, somebody changed the lane to hit somebody else. Now we're dealing with the unknown out there. You know, we might see skid marks, yaw marks, but we have the video because of the upload capability of that particular program on it.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's great to hear this, because I know I've had experiences with several clients When we sit there and talk about risk and how to evaluate, how to manage it and whatnot, one of the ones I get quite frequently, and I love this a lot, is, oh, I don't have to worry about the video. I can go into the system anytime and download it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I had a client who literally 8 months to the day went in to go download that video and it was gone because their telematics provider had wiped everything else. They didn't realize that in the contract, it said, we wiped the servers at 6 months because we're trying to save you space.
One of the things on that one, John, just a side note, is I go on a theory that nothing is ever gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, video, because of the bandwidth that would require, maybe. But I had a case not too long ago where another attorney had it. The client wasn't pleased. They turned it over to us. And it was a situation where no one had saved the logs because of a purchase of the company, a number of factors. We're able to go back to the telematics provider and said, hey, is this longer than 6 months? But, and they do a lot of products based upon data analysis.
Mm-hmm.
My bet was, and my bet turned out to be correct in this one, that the data was back there. So I was able to dig it out on it. But yeah, that's one of the big things is don't lean on that being available. Get it right away and download it right away, because you never know what's going to happen. Either intentionally, part of the contract, or unintentionally. In today's world with this stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to call it a close right there on part one of Living the Safety Culture with advocate and truck defense lawyer Doug Marcello. Thank you so much for joining us. Please be sure to stay tuned for part two coming up ahead in a week, where Doug, John, and I will explore what happens as telematics moves into the courtroom and best practices and procedures for putting your Kevlar underwear on. You will hear Doug say that how you manage your safety program can be the number one key determinant of your profitability in a year. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss another release, and we look forward to seeing you in the next version of Compliance Clips. Compliance Clips is a joint production of Summit Risk Solutions and Links Consulting. Thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you in our next release. Take care.